Okay, so your colon, it might surprise you to know, it has more bacteria than there are people on the earth. So, what you feed your colon helps determine how you feel tomorrow. Today, we want to talk about fiber and colon health and why colon health is so important. So, we're going to start with fiber and what it does for your colon.
All right, that sounds like a great topic to talk about. I think fiber is pretty important. We touched on it a little bit in our microbiome episode, and we'll go back on some of those things again because it is very important. But there's a problem. Most people are told eat more fiber. That's just kind of a one-liner, just told eat more fiber. And we don't even ever learn the differences between the different types of fiber, soluble versus insoluble, or why that difference actually matters, what that means. So let's work on that and let's help improve our own knowledge about fiber and the audience's knowledge about fiber so they can use it as a tool to navigate their health and to really utilize in a way that's going to bring health benefits across the.
Yeah, I think I think that would teach me a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Me too.
so let's start with the difference between soluble and insoluble fiber.
Okay. Well, let's go back a little bit. I'm going to make it even
Okay.
more general than that, Eva.
Okay. Okay.
I want to ask, well, what's fiber?
Oh, I think that's a great idea. Okay, let's do that.
Yeah. When I was younger, a lot of times they use the word, quote, roughage.
Oh,
I was like,
yeah,
remember
that's an old
that?
school term. Yeah,
Yeah.
roughage.
But you know what? I want to make it very easy for the audience and for ourselves.
Yes.
Fiber is basically a carbohydrate or a carb that our bodies cannot digest. So that carbohydrate is locked away from actually becoming glucose in our bodies, and it stays undigested to a certain point within our guts. That's fiber.
Okay. And why is that so important to our health and our colon health?
Well,
Our
this
gut health?
fiber, yeah, that our body can't digest because the structure of it is a certain way, so our body just can't break it down, and that's actually a good thing. So why is that important?
Mhm.
Well, when that carbohydrate that cannot be digested by us, by our bodies, when it travels to the gut in the colon, it becomes food for the trillions of bacteria that live in our gut. So if we just mentioned it, there's more bacteria in your gut, one person, than all of the people on Earth. There are more bacteria in your gut than there are your own body cells. There's a lot of bacteria there, right? So why is it important? Well, the bacteria there, it's almost like an organ. I mean, yeah, they're not our cells, but those little guys, they are very important organisms for our health. We live in a symbiotic or sort of like a mutually beneficial relationship with those bacteria. And it isn't just one kind, it's just several different kinds of bacteria that are there. And those trillions, they ferment and produce important things. They do their little business eating that fiber, that undigestible carbohydrate to us. And they produce things like short chain fatty acids. I'll mention the names, and I don't want the audience to get too deep into this, but one of the more important ones is butyrate, but there's also things called acetate, propionate. Again, don't get lost in that. Well, why are those important? They influence inflammation. They influence metabolic health. How? They make you more insulin sensitive. They make your gut cells healthier. They just do a lot of good things when you have the right kind of bacteria in there. Um, it
So,
doesn't, yeah, go ahead.
so if you don't have those things, then could it lead to more insulin resistance and metabolic disease?
Yes, in fact, a lot of people think a huge reason why we see more metabolic disease and issues with insulin resistance and obesity, because sometimes I have a high suspicion when I see people, I believe them that they tried every diet, they tried everything,
Mhm.
and they just still constantly fight with inability to shed weight and have this battle with obesity. I have a strong suspicion that their microbiome is out of whack. And they're not, it's not in a good place. The species may be, the microbiome species may not be optimized. I think that's where it impacts health very negatively, where it impacts insulin resistance and obesity. Again, as you know, the two are related.
Yeah, and when you say microbiome, you mean the gut health, basically,
Yes,
right?
the
The
trillions
the
of
the
bacteria.
gut garden.
Gut garden, that's right. So
Yeah.
go back to our our microbiome episode. It's a
Yeah.
garden in your gut.
And you if that's true, you can see that the standard American diet in the past 50 years has the roughage fiber, whatever you wanna call it, with processed food has dramatically decreased. So it would kinda lead to believe what you're saying is that it's part of the reason for we all the metabolic disease we see and obesity.
Yes, I think it's a big factor in that because the diet's changed significantly. To your
Okay.
point, whether we talk about the bread that you make, and they don't make bread like that in the store shelves because it has the entire portion of the grain that has the fibers and things like that. Well, a lot of those things have oils that go rancid, so it has poor shelf life. That's just one example
Yes.
of just how our food's been changed for easy transport, long shelf life,
Mhm.
low prices. And that's great because, food scarcity is not a great thing. But unfortunately, our food has been changed so much in the food landscape and the food environment, unfortunately, does not promote healthy microbiomes. And we have to make, I think, interventions and be thinking actively and intervening in ways that we'll have to address that food landscape that we live in now to address this fiber issue. Because I don't think the average American gets enough fiber. I think that, I forgot the numbers. I'm going to say average is like 10 to 20 grams of fiber a day. I think they recommend more like 30 to 50, depending on, size and
Mhm.
if you're a male or female. But most people don't get enough. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
And yeah.
let's keep talking about that, how to get enough and soluble versus insoluble and how we can do that.
Okay. Well, I'm
Resistance.
sorry. You asked earlier, and I I made it more basic just to say that
No,
fiber
that
is
was
yeah.
good. I
Yeah.
really I really that's good.
Yeah. So soluble fiber. So what is soluble fiber? Soluble means something that can dissolve. So think of it, it can dissolve in water
Mhm.
and it forms a gel. So they both types of fiber have benefits and you need both, by the way. So soluble fiber, it dissolves in water, forms a gel. Some foods will have both soluble and insoluble fiber both in them. Let me tell you some benefits of this soluble fiber. It lowers cholesterol. It slows glucose absorption, so it gives your body more time to process the glucose that comes into the bloodstream. It feeds gut bacteria, i.e., the microbiome. Right. So,
Mhm.
some foods naturally that have a good deal of this soluble fiber are things like oats and beans, even like fruits like apples, chia seeds. When you put chia seeds in water, you'll see this little jelly-like thing that forms on the outside. Yeah, that's that soluble fiber. Xylem, I think that some people take that as like a supplement. So those things have a good amount of soluble fiber. Again, what does it do? Some good benefits: lowers glucose absorption, it lowers cholesterol. It promotes your microbiome, and in addition to that, it promotes satiety. So you'll hear me use that word as well. That's just the feeling of contentment and fullness when it comes to wanting to eat more food. It increases that feeling of fullness and saying that, I think I had enough food." So it promotes that.
Okay. That's good, and that makes perfect sense to me because I can eat a whole bag of potato chips and not be full, but I can't eat a
Mm.
whole bag of apples.
And yes, and it goes back to also those potato chips, they have very little, if any, fiber. I mean, it has potatoes in it, but again, potatoes can be a redemptive food, but not when they're fried and put in a package like that, especially if they're
Right.
fried in seed oil and all that. So that's a
Yeah,
great example
yeah.
of a good food that has been processed and can potentially undermine your health. And it's easy calories, high density, easy to eat, easy to overeat.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, this is great information. So let's go into the insoluble fiber.
Good. So yeah, insoluble fiber, opposite of soluble, which dissolves in water, this typically does not dissolve in water. Primary benefits, it adds to the bulk of your stool. So it makes your poop bigger, which make it easier to pass. It improves regularity. And it just seems to help in that way. It's primarily in things like vegetables, nuts, and whole grain. So the fiber you see in whole grains tends to be mostly of this type, the insoluble type. And it has its benefits, like I said, primarily with regularity, the bulking of stool, so that those are important parts as well.
But it's also when you say regularity, I mean, you mentioned in one of our podcasts, when you don't have normal bowel movements and that sits there in your colon, that's not good. That's not good
That
for your
that
colon. It
that
can
is not
lead.
good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not just as it's not just uncomfortable, but it's
Uh-huh.
actually not good for your health. Is that
Y
correct?
Yes, and I'll give you some examples. So, I mean, my friends, one day we're talking about regularity and how important it is. Again, your GI system is so important to your overall health. Gut-brain access and your mood, your heart health, your metabolic health. It literally, it just that's why this fiber episode ties that all together. But it's believed, remember I said that you don't hear much about small intestine cancer, right? You hear about colon cancer.
Uh-huh.
Well, one reason why, colon cancer is on people's minds because it's increasing in its incidence, especially in younger
And
people.
young people, yeah.
Uh-huh. So when that stool sits there, the stool has a lot of things like leftover products of bile and other things, which are believed to be potentially bad factors for increasing the chance that your colon cells could become dysplastic. Dysplastic means like dysplasia. It means that they're altered and
Mhm.
they're a step closer to becoming tumors or potentially deranged cells that could become colon cancer. So that's why there's a lot of thought that if you're not regular and that stool sits there, your colon cells are exposed to carcinogenic agents for a longer period of time. Now, these are naturally occurring. Again, your microbiome does play a role into how carcinogenic it is, but
Mhm.
also plays a role in regular. If you're not regular, that sits there and your colon cells get exposed to that potential cell altering chemicals that are naturally in your stool for a longer period of time, and that theoretically could increase your risk of colon cancer even.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, you mentioned that leafy green vegetables, that there's a lot of insoluble fiber in that, but what other foods or ways could we get insoluble fiber in our diet?
So things like, some people take psyllium fiber supplements. I mentioned psyllium fiber has both soluble and insoluble fiber in this. It has both. So
Uh-huh.
you could boost that up. You could take those kind of supplements. You could also, if you can tolerate it, and again, it's kind of nuanced. Whole grains have this kind of insoluble fiber. Nuts have this insoluble fiber. So consumption of those could help increase your fiber content and the amount you take in daily.
Okay. I will say a couple things about whole grains. You have to be careful because sometimes things in the supermarket that are labeled whole grains are not actually whole grains. They
Mm.
still they don't have as much fiber as real whole grains do. Okay. Well, what about, like I've heard the term prebiotics and probiotics and all of that stuff. I mean, what's the difference and when do you need them? And
That's a good question. We went over this in our microbiome episode, but I think it's worth mentioning again because it's very confusing. The two words, first of all, they sound alike. Pre and pro. That's only this is different by one vowel.
yeah.
So prebiotic. What is a prebiotic? Prebiotic is basically the kind of fiber that your microbiome can consume. So it's food for the microbiome. Let's go back to the garden analogy. It's the
Mhm.
it's the fertilizer for the garden, and the prebiotics feed those bacteria. Just think about trying to remember better before, so it goes in there, so it helps them get the food they need, so they can be healthy and produce the short chain fatty acids. And these beneficial bacteria, they increase the short chain fatty acid production, especially one of the more important short chain fatty acids is butyrate, and the audience can look up butyrate, and it's being studied for a whole host of different, a lot of chronic medical conditions like even brain health, cognitive health, mood disorders, gut health, potentially as something that decrease the risk of different kind of cancers, and not just colon cancer. I think it's been studied in even some types of other cancers. So it's a big deal, and that supports those metabolic markers. In our BMI portion, we talked about how important it is to increase your metabolic health. Well, it's believed that downstream this is a big part of that. So these prebiotics, they're naturally in foods like green bananas. Again, think about carbohydrates that your body cannot digest, but these microbiome bacteria species can. Green bananas. Beans and lentils, like raw potato starch, cooked and cooled rice and potatoes that make some of those carbs that changes their chemical structure so that our body can't digest all of it. Those things feed the microbiome. Uh, Probiotics. What is a probiotic? Think of probiotics as live bacteria that you consume. I don't want to get too much into the names of the species. And these
Right.
bacteria are found in fermented foods, found in yogurt and kefir, kimchi, and each of those have different types of species. And they found that it's interesting that, again, I don't want to get too much into the details excessively, but these are not necessarily the same species that are going to be the ones that reside and is the main part of your microbiome, but they seem to have some type of beneficial effect in replenishing things when the microbiome needs replenishing, like after a course of antibiotics or a colonoscopy prep or stress. And there's many things that I didn't mention this in the microbiome episode, and I wish I did. There's stress hurts your microbiome. And did we know that non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs also hurt your microbiome? So there are people out there that pound Advil every day. And I was like, I think that's just not a good idea on several levels, whether it's potential increase in cardiovascular risk, but also those things hurt your microbiome. Alcohol hurts your microbiome. And I'm not saying don't take Advil or don't ever drink wine, but take into consideration everything that we do, things like that, they do have an effect on your microbiome. But the probiotics help replenish that when they need help. Fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi,
Okay.
kefir, yogurt, those things. And there are also commercial probiotic formulas out there with different bacteria species that are available over the counter. And you may want to do research and see what people had their experience with the benefit of those. But probiotics in foods that have live bacteria that you consume, these bacteria help your microbiome. They may be a part of your microbiome, but they are mostly like helpers. And going back to the garden analogy, if prebiotics help fertilize the garden, probiotics help seed the garden.
Okay. So to have a healthy gut, we need all of this stuff. Um,
Yes.
yeah, that's is this part of I don't want to go too far, but there's all this in the news about leaky gut. You hear that all the time.
Mm,
Leaky gut syndrome.
mm.
Do you think part of this not having the fiber, the pre and the pro and all that stuff leads to leaky gut?
I think it does because if you look at it ancestrally, many cultures, if not most cultures, have a diet that's rich in prebiotics, the
Yeah.
food. They also have diets that are rich in probiotics, the live bacteria or the seeds. And I
Uh-huh.
think you need to have both. Another thing didn't mention is that for your prebiotics and your microbiome, another thing that's very beneficial are things that are like polyphenols that are found in coffee or tea or berries. They also help your microbiome thrive and do better. Again, if you
Okay.
think of ancestrally, it's all there, right? I mean, like whether
Yeah.
it's yogurt, fermented foods, foods that are uh, like kimchi, and the
Uh-huh.
societies have evolved around eating these foods. A lot of them are used as preservation methods, right? And we have this healthy relationship with these bacteria. We're in symbiosis with them, and I think that our modern food processing, our modern environments, and the good things like Advil can even impact your microbiome negative. Those things are things that have come on that from an evolutionary ancestral standpoint, our bodies haven't really even seen until the last past 100 years.
Uh-huh.
Antibiotics, I don't think have you had antibiotics for 100 years? I don't think so, right? So
Mm-mm.
these are new things that ancestrally our bodies haven't seen. So we're still even now finding out what the long-term effects of these are. And as a general principle, go back to basics and think about maybe how your great grandmother would have eaten if they had an abundance and not scarcity of food, because food scarcity was a real danger back then. But and that kind of ties into what would be healthy for your gut. What would be the right type of consumption of natural pro and prebiotics,
Uh-huh.
natural amount of fiber intake. I mean, going to how much fiber is recommended. I think I have something here that says, let me see. So it looks like for women, they recommend about 25 to 30 grams a day.
Uh-huh.
Men 30 to 40. It says here the average American only takes about 10 to 15.
Mhm.
So there's a big gap.
So if, to kinda wrap it up, like, if where does one start if you feel like your gut health is not like a couple pointers to start to get your gut health back in order?
Well,
Just
I would say
tie
somewhere to
this
start.
together.
Yeah. Pre and probiotics start gradually,
'Kay.
especially with the fibers. If you go from just 10 grams of fiber a day to 40, it was going to mess you up. It will not be good. You'll hate this show. You're like, you guys are, you hurt me, right? Go slow. Go slow. Work up your fiber content. I think, again, in the microbiome episode, I warned people when you take some of those prebiotics, take half the dose they recommend on the package. Just do that for a week at least before you go out. But, some practical steps.
Yes.
Maybe again, if you're not on the paleo diet, maybe add beans to meals. That has a lot of good prebiotic resistant starches on there. Um, Definitely, I would say don't drink fruit juice. Eat whole fruit instead, because the fruit juice has no fiber. They take it all out of there, and it becomes actually, I think, a metabolically harmful product when you drink juice. Eat the whole fruit. That's how it's intended to be eaten, because the fiber in there, remember we also mentioned, it slows down glucose absorption. But when you drink fruit juice, it's like, kind of like in terms of the metabolic impact, it's like a soda, right? So eat
Yeah.
whole fruit.
Okay.
Try to include vegetables, especially the non-starchy ones. The cruciferous ones are especially very dense nutritionally. Try to
Mhm.
eat those kind of vegetables with most meals. If you can tolerate them, add nuts and seeds. Maybe try things like, oats, or if you can tolerate bread, maybe the good kind of bread where it has adequate fiber in there that contributes to your overall fiber content. So take it slow. And again, you'll notice, you know, processed foods do not contain these. So it's
So it
again,
seems to be a theme.
yes, right.
Seems to be a theme. Let's
That's right. That's right.
processed foods are bad for us overall.
Yeah.
They're convenient. It seems like we have kind of given up our health for convenience without even
Yes.
knowing it.
Yes, that's right. And, I'm also going to add some key takeaways for fiber. One of the most overlooked nutrients in modern diet, try to get your adequate amount of fiber a day, 25 to 40 grams a day. Helps with digestion, health, cholesterol, blood sugar. Not all fiber works the same way, but you need both kinds, soluble and insoluble. And your gut microbiome depends on what you feed it. So feed it well. There's things that hurt it, like alcohol, antibiotics, and anti-inflammatory drugs like Advil. Small changes make a big difference. Implement, if you can, naturally more vegetables, beans, lentils, whole fruits instead of juice, maybe nuts and seeds. Increase it gradually.
Close this out. I think this has been very informative. If this helped clarify fiber for you, then share this video with someone who's been told to eat more fiber and never really understood why or how, and subscribe and share. And you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook too for more content.
Thanks so much for watching. We hope this episode gave you powerful, practical health tips you can actually use. If you enjoyed this content, give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. It really helps our channel and podcast grow. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook so you never miss an episode. When you support us, you're helping more people just like you get access to real, helpful health information. Let's grow together and live a health yeah life.